Advocates for school choice claim that changing how individual students end up at one school rather than another will contribute to significantly expanding access to quality education. The rhetoric of choice emphasizes the power of individual action and decision-making. It also veils the deep influences of policy and politics. The rhetoric of choice was used to describe how desegregation was just that, a choice. The problem was, white families made choices that derailed segregation. The choices that derailed segregation were that white families moved to less diverse districts. These districts that were less actively desegregating. They sent their kids to private schools, all which undermined segregation mandates and led to the resilience of segregation. The rhetoric of de facto segregation comes from the actions of individuals as they enter the housing market, create or reinforce segregation, and then produce segregated schools. The rhetoric of de jure segregation comes from the segregation that comes from state action and explicitly discriminatory law or policy. The argument arose that de facto does not exist due to the fact that it is a social makeup. Policyholders held the argument that because segregation was a choice the people were making, it was not their responsibility. Policyholders took no responsibility for the fact that they made these choices easy. When dealing with segregation and the flee of white families from cities to the suburbs, there are things that you need to consider. White families were reacting to clear policy-based incentives and disincentives. Federal tax and lending policies made purchasing suburban homes more possible and the more desirable choice than remaining in the city. Gas taxes were lowered to help transport families the long distances from the cities to the suburbs and to the non-desegregated schools. At the same time, there were no federally backed mortgages for existing urban homes, or access to these suburban homes that were owned by segregationists running the real estate businesses. In the end, policyholders and real estate businesses brought over the wealthy white families and kept the black families out. As described by Erickson, this laid the brick-and-mortar foundation for the segregated patterns of American cities today. Busing made it so that black kids had to spend more time on the bus than the white kids. It also led to the closing of more black schools. Myths that segregation failures were on individual choice alone were used to hide the amount of inequality involved. This parallels what is happening in charter schools today. Charter schools offer parents the choice in schooling for their children, but there are constraints on that choice based on past and current policy. These constraints include that charter schools mostly enroll children from their own districts. Most give priority to applications from students living in their own district, taking most spots from out-of-district students who apply. The second issue addressed in Public Education Under Siege is the achievement gap. The term achievement gap is commonly used to describe disparities in academic outcomes and variations on measures of academic performance that tend to correspond to the race and class backgrounds of students. A new crusade was born, a crusade to close the achievement gap among the American people. In 2001, the No Child Left Behind Act was supposed to be a solution for this. The No Child Left Behind Act had requirements for states to collect data on student achievement and desegregate test scores by race and increase awareness on the academic disparities in America. Although awareness has grown because of the No Child Left Behind Act, little has been done to actually close the gap. Standardized tests were created as a way to hold schools accountable. This, however, did not take into account the other gaps that America is facing. This did not take into account the unequal access to quality early childhood education, the preparation gap, the inequalities in school funding, the allocation gap, or the differences in the amount of support well-educated, affluent parents can provide to their children versus poor, less educated parents, the parent gap, or strained relationships between students and their teachers influenced by lower expectations on poor and minority students, the student-teacher gap. None of these are considered when discussing the achievement gap. The argument is presented that only policies based on fighting inequality will produce actual results in attempting to close the achievement gap.
Created using Powtoon.